I didn't believe a clinical trial was going to work because nothing else had. In my dad's side of the family, some people died young, but it was, Southern Baptists, God's will. They're not going to go and spend money to figure out what happened. They're just, praise them for being here and then kind of move on until I got sick. So I was really the first one in my immediate family that had cancer, but I had no idea what a clinical trial was. All I'd really ever heard of that is, again, what I seen on TV or what you think you see of like, oh, I'm a lab rat. They have total control over everything. And it turns out I was like, well, I was wrong about everything. I have all the control in the clinical trial. I could pick and choose if I want to do it or if I want to stop. At that point, the drug was doing so good. They told me they were going to be able to ship it to Asheville and I was going to be able to get it at my local cancer center instead of driving every 3 weeks, 5 hours each way to Duke. And that made a huge difference in keeping on the trial or doing the trial and everything. So that was November, right before Thanksgiving of 2016. And I'm actually still on that drug right now. It keeps my cancer from spreading. The cancer's still active and alive, but it just controls it.
This is Genetics for Healthcare, a podcast for patients.
This is Genetics for Healthcare, podcast dedicated to patients and their caregivers to help them advocate for a precision medicine approach to their healthcare, which includes disease screening, treatment, prevention, and survivorship. You can find us at geneticsforhealthcare.com. From there, you can connect with us on any of our social media platforms. While you're there, especially on YouTube, hit subscribe so you can get notifications for new incredible content like this one. Today, it is my honor to have JJ Singleton, colorectal cancer advocate, diagnosed with colon cancer at the age of 27 and has become a powerful voice of advocacy for prevention and using his voice to inspire the world to conquer colon and rectal cancer. JJ, thanks for taking time to join us on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. It is a true honor.
So when we met, of all places, Las Vegas, okay. So when we met, within like 5 minutes, I saw a lot of myself in you. You're an athlete. Football's your thing. Football's my thing. And we're both from small towns. So tell me a little bit about your background, how you grew up, your family.
I'm from a very rural area in Western North Carolina, about 30 minutes west of Asheville, a town called Canton. It was a farming or a paper mill town until the paper mill got shut down a few years ago. But I grew up and I fell in sports because that got me out of working in the tomato and tobacco field. My parents, my grandparents, you had to work in the farm or you could go and practice and play sports. So that's kind of how I found my love of athletics. My dad and my uncle were both Division I football players. I played Division II. And yeah, it was just, I love growing up here. It's a tight knit. I'm still friends with people I went to school with. I see them almost every day. And it was just a very good upbringing.
So I got to ask you what your squad is. So what's your college squad? What's your pro squad?
My dad played at Virginia Tech, so I'm a Hokie fan. I was there until this last season. Me and my dad had season tickets for about 6 years. He got a new job, so had to work weekends, and then I started traveling a lot. So, and then the pro is the Panthers or any Virginia Tech player. Always going to cheer for them. But
so when you were growing up, did you have a family history of cancer? Or did you know that you had a family history of cancer?
No. Again, we were, rural Appalachian, didn't go to the doctor too much. We went for physicals to play sports. And even, my grandparents, my dad and them, I never see them really go to the doctor or anything. So I know in my dad's side of the family, some people died young, but it was, Southern Baptists, God's will. They're not going to go and spend money to figure out what happened. They're just, praise them for being here and then kind of move on until I got sick. So I was really the first one in my immediate family that had cancer.
One of the things that I think we were talking about at the time, my uncles, people in family, when you grow up in a small town, bad things happen to good people getting diagnosed with cancer or, any other number of things. So the point is no one talked about it. No one talked about it. If someone did know they had cancer, they just wouldn't tell anyone, and they would do that. But what led up to you being diagnosed? What were your symptoms and what were you experiencing?
Around the start of 2015, because as I said, I was a football player, but once I got hurt too many concussions, I went and enjoyed college. So gained a lot of weight, wasn't living the best then. So I started getting healthy, went and started doing CrossFit with one of my old high school football coaches, was losing weight. But around Memorial Day, I felt a throbbing in my abdomen. And around that time is when I started having bowel changes, hard to use the bathroom, blood in my stool, and me being a guy, I ignored it for months until it just got worse and worse until my mom made me go to the doctor. At that time, you could actually see what turned out to be the tumor throb through my skin and my abdomen. And at that time, I was barely using the bathroom. And every time I did, it was full of blood. And I wasn't able to eat really much at that time either and was losing a crazy amount of weight.
Were you referred to genetic testing at any point during that?
Not until probably a couple months later, I went and once I had the colonoscopy, I was within surgery within 6 days,
Oh,
and
wow.
then recovered from that. Went and met my oncologist in Asheville, and that's when he referred me to his colleague down there at Duke, just because I was the youngest person he had ever really seen with colorectal cancer. And when I was at Duke, that's when they first mentioned genetic testing.
And so what was that like? Well, the just the treatment experience, obviously they diagnosed, and you said you had a tumor that was you could see through the skin. And so what was the sequence that they did for you?
They removed 80% of my colon, a bunch of my small intestines. They were able to reattach, so I never had a colostomy or ostomy bag. They said it was within a quarter of an inch either way. If I would have, they would have had to remove my whole colon. But I was able to do that, and then started, frontline full Fox chemo, which you see chemo, you see people portray it on TV or anything, and nothing can prepare you for that experience of I've never felt worse. I've never felt like less of a human than when I first started the treatments.
So and I've heard you share your story, going through the chemotherapy. You made it all the way through the
Yeah.
rounds after surgery, and were declared no evidence of disease at that time.
Yeah, I went through the 12 rounds of, typical Folfox. The surgery was a success. So after surgery, they had clear margins. There was no lymph node involvement at that time. And they were like, all right, this is 12 rounds clean up to kill any, cancer cell that might have got out during surgery. And I was like, okay, I can do this 6 months, and then I'm putting cancer behind me. Finished it, and then within 6 weeks, I felt that throbbing in my abdomen again. And this time, I was at the doctor at like 6 a.m. waiting on him to pull into the doctor's office, and a bunch of tests, biopsies, scans later, it revealed that it had spread to my abdominal wall and lymph nodes throughout my body.
So at that time, what did they tell you your options were at the time?
I went right back down to Duke, and my only options really at that time, because it was so much around like the veins and arteries in my abdominal wall. They were like, we don't want to do surgery because there's such a high percentage we could nick something in there and you bleed out on the table. So we just started the next line of chemo, and they were like, you get a 25% chance to be alive in 5 years. This is incurable right now because it's not in a solid organ. We can't remove it. So you're basically going to have cancer the rest of your life. And
So at that, how did that hit you in terms of, okay, what do I
I,
do with these?
I tell people leading up to that point, I thought hearing words "you have cancer" was going to be the worst words I've ever heard in my life. But when they tell you your cancer's back and it's that for the rest of your life, no matter that could be 5 years or 25 years, it it put me in like a very dark place. I just remember going back to the hotel room and just sitting down in the shower and for hours, just like, am I going to die? Am I going to see the age of 30? Am I going to leave, my family with like, oh, what happened to him? And like all those thoughts just kept coming and kept going through my mind. And it took me a good, few days before I was like, okay, I guess I am going to do this next treatment, and I'm going to try to stay alive as long as possible.
So I want to come back to that in terms of the mental distress of that and how you dealt with it, because you've also been pretty vocal about that and finding support. But I want to come back to that. When they said clinical trial, like what was your understanding of what that meant and how they explained that to you?
Yeah, by the time I got to my clinical trial, I had 3 more chemo lines that all failed. I was just wanting anything because by that point, I was like, "I just need to make it to age 30," because I didn't believe a clinical trial was gonna work because nothing else had, but I had no idea what a clinical trial was. All I'd really ever heard of that is, again, what I seen on TV or what you think you see of like, "Oh, I'm a lab rat." They have total control over everything. And it turns out I was like, well, I was wrong about everything. I have all the control in the clinical trial. I can pick and choose if I want to do it or if I want to stop. But leading up to it, all I know is I'm signing papers, and every at the bottom of every page was like, this might result in death because we don't know what the side effects are or if it's going to work or if it's going to do anything.
So after you did that, signing everything away on paper, what were the next steps? And tell me about the trial itself.
I made my a trip down to Duke because everything was through Duke at that point, like 4 or 5 times within 2 weeks just to get all the scans, the biopsies, the education that you gotta meet with, and they gotta tell you about everything. They gotta go through every page that you've already signed. Now they gotta go through it with you. And it was just a lot of paperwork, a lot of tests, a lot of everything. But at that point, the drug was doing so good. They told me they were going to be able to ship it to Asheville, and I was going to be able to get it at my local cancer center instead of driving every 3 weeks, 5 hours each way to Duke. And that made a huge difference in keeping on the trial or doing the trial and everything.
So how long has it been since you first started the trial?
I actually got my first dosage when I was in the hospital. Right before I was going to take my first dose, I got hospitalized for almost a month because the cancer grew around my stomach and intestines and closed it completely off. So anything I put in my mouth, I was just throwing up.
Mm,
And so that was November, right before Thanksgiving of 2016. And I'm actually still on that drug right now. It's off
okay.
the clinical trial. It's proven, and it has kept my can't like. I'm a weird patient, even in the clinical trial space. You never want to hear you're unique when you go to major cancer centers, but it keeps my cancer from spreading. The cancer's still active and alive, but it just controls it.
And so the drug that you were on is called so
Pembrolizumab, yeah, or Keytruda.
okay.
Everybody knows it as
Pembrolizumab.
Keytruda because they see it on the commercials all the time.
Yeah, hopefully they can put a commercial on here. But pembrolizumab. So, okay, so at the time, it wasn't approved for treating colon cancer, and there was a lot of unknowns. But what was your experience in terms of side effects and obviously the chemotherapy,
Yeah.
as you mentioned, was kind of harsh.
Oh yeah, chemo and immunotherapy side effects are very different in my situation of my experience. I still get extremely tired from the immunotherapy, this drug. I have skin issues, bone and joint pain because your body's feeling like it's fighting an illness constantly. So I tell people like how you feel when you get over the flu and your body's just exhausted and the bone pain. I'm like, that's what I feel like most days. Um, but there was no, I mean, I get nauseous every other treatment or two, but nothing like the throwing up in the bathroom issues from regular chemo.
So since you've been on the trial, as you mentioned, you've been able to travel. You've been able to do other things that you had not done before. How has being on the clinical trial kind of renewed like your sense of purpose for using your voice for advocacy?
Yeah, when I started the trial, I hadn't ever even thought about doing advocacy because I was still, my head down, just like I want to get through this. And in my mind, I was like, nobody wants to hear a guy from a town of, a little over 1,000 people, what he has to say about this. But once the drugs started working and I was finally able to look past age of 30 and be like, okay, I might be here a few more years or who knows how long, I found advocacy, and it's been a whirlwind and like a snowball going from like me just posting stuff on social media to getting asked to speak at keynote speeches and all across the country. But it's gave me a purpose, and it's like renewed my interest in like life. And I've met incredible people, and I'm a better person because of what I do now.
Well, I mean, the proof is in the pudding because we would have never met if you wouldn't have taken that step of faith to do the clinical trial and to, respond to the call when people say, "Hey, man, listen, you can help people." And this is why we have this platform to share stories like yours because there's somebody out there that has maybe gone through those same things of the mental distress, or somebody who has colorectal cancer or any other cancer in their family and don't want to go get screened because they have anxiety. What do you say to those folks?
I mean, I understand. I still, have to kind of shame some people in my family to go get their colonoscopy, or, be like, if I ever see you in the chemo chair beside me, I'm going to make your life hell because I'm going to be so mad at you. But I mean, in our world today, there's such a stigma still around the colonoscopy, around the prep, around, talking about cancer, and especially in men in different regions. I always try to, acknowledge, yes, it is hard, and it is, an up and down. You're going to feel good about it. You might feel horrible about it, but the outcome of going and getting screened, of talking about it, is so much better than pushing everything down, or, burying your head in the sand.
I've heard you talk about like breaking stigmas, right? Because no one wants to talk about it, or you don't want to go and get a colonoscopy because it makes you feel a certain way. What are some of the stigmas that you have heard people have and that you speak to?
Well, definitely, like you were saying, they don't want a colonoscopy because they don't want to do the prep, or they don't want to have a camera, put into your body. And I try to tell them, like, the propofol that they give you, you're good. You don't care about anything going on right there. So try to break it there. But a lot of stigmas is just nobody wants to talk about their bowel habits. Nobody wants to talk about being sick because a lot of people like to hear good news. Even subconsciously, I found out, like, the vast majority of the population, they don't want to hear bad news all the time. They don't want to, and even me, you don't want to feel like you're a burden to people. And I know that goes across a lot of times because when you're talking about the heavy stuff, or the cancer, or, being sick every 3 weeks from treatment, like, it almost feels like you're being a burden onto your audience or who follows you. And I think that's a lot. And then just with men, talking about your feelings, not isolating mental health. There's so many things that we stigmatize even in today that we need to get rid of.
Okay, so let's jump into that because so finding a community, like what was it that helped you grow? Because a lot of times when we talk about our bowel habits and things like this, um, we don't feel comfortable. We're ashamed. We don't want to mention to our doctor like, "Hey, there's a
Yeah.
little blood in my stool." But what has empowered you to be a little bit more like vigorous about advocating and talking to people? Like you said, if you find someone in your family that's in the chemo chair next to you, you can make their life hell. Like that I felt that, you know what I mean? So what has it meant to deal with the emotional distress, the trauma, the things like that? How have you been able to deal with that?
Mhm. Therapy helped me a lot. Like, as I said, after I started my clinical trial when I was in the hospital, I actually went 450 days where I couldn't eat. I was on TPN infusions because the cancer, they had to wait till it, shrank a little bit, go back in there and do surgeries. So I was pretty much bedridden for 14 months. And that's when I hit rock bottom with my mental health, and scared me enough to where I had suicidal thoughts, and I was close to doing a really bad thing. And I got scared enough to where I got help. And I was the first person in my family, like as a guy, or that my friends, to admit, like, yeah, I need help. I need to go to sit and see a therapist. And that changed the trajectory of everything. Slowly but surely, I got, in a better space. And then I found a group, Man Up to Cancer, which is a men's group for cancer. And that opened my eyes to where, okay, all these communities isn't just about telling your medical history or what's going on. You can actually find friendship and connection there. And then it spread to colorectal cancer groups and allowed me to find my voice to where I'm not ashamed to talk about, yeah, I had a lot of blood in my stool, or yes, I can't use the bathroom right now, or going through whatever I'm going through.
That's incredible because your voice matters. At the end of the day, every single one of us was put here for a purpose. Just a bit of information. March is Colorectal Cancer Awareness Month. And we talk about it as being colorectal cancer, but there are actually two different diseases, colon
Mhm.
and rectal cancer. But according to the American Cancer Society, there are over 150,000 new cases of colorectal cancer every year. And the incidence of those being diagnosed under the age of 50, JJ, is the biggest alarm.
Yes.
In 2026, the American Cancer Society published a study in JAMA, the Journal of American Medical Association, that showed that early onset colorectal cancer, meaning you're diagnosed under the age of 50, increased by 1% each year since 2005, took it from the fifth leading cause of cancer deaths to being the number one cause in this age group. And they project by the age of 2030, it could be the most deadly cancer of all people under the age of 50. When you think about, what you've been able to do to impact and create awareness, what's been the most rewarding experience for you?
The most rewarding is just to see the impact in others' lives. Like I've introduced people to them being comfortable and seeing them grow from their diagnosis and they're testing their foot out into these organizations or to become an advocate or just to better their life and to see the growth in them and then how many people they touch. So it's kind of like that ripple. Like I can start it with a few people, but then I see them grow and them do amazing things. And I think that is at the core of what I feel is advocacy. And as you said, like especially in the young onset colorectal cancer space, it is I've lost a lot of friends there, but I feel like it's still my duty to keep doing this, to keep doing on because that next person who knows what impact they might have. And if I can show them a little bit of ways to where it's not as bad for them as it was for me starting out, I think that's like the true purpose of why I'm here and able to do this.
And you've made a difference. You've worked with many of the associations, patient advocacy groups that are trying to get the word out there. I saw you on the Colorectal Cancer Alliance, and they had something that was interesting. It was called the state of screening. They did a study on colorectal cancer screening, and here's some deep stuff, JJ. In that study they did, it said 69% of people would rather file taxes than get a colonoscopy. They said 57% don't realize that colonoscopies prevent colorectal cancer, and 98% would be more likely to go for the colonoscopy if they knew that. So, for somebody maybe has a history or they're watching this, like, what do you say to that person who's just been putting it off?
I mean, I try to show all my life, like, if you can have a chance not to go through surgeries or chemo or have your life totally changed by a cancer diagnosis, colonoscopy is the golden standard. There's other tests that you can do, but the colonoscopy is, that standard because most people, like you said, they don't realize it is screening, but they can also prevent cancer by cutting the polyp out. It's the only cancer that has a screening test that can be prevention too.
So at this stage, you've traveled, man. You've traveled the country, traveled the world, sharing your message. Um, what do you want to be the legacy of your voice? Now we obviously want you to continue to advocate, and we pray that you're here for a long time. But through your work and advocacy, what do you want to be the ultimate goal for the efforts that you have?
Yeah, I mean, my goals in advocacy has changed a lot over the years. When I started, it was just colorectal. Now I do a lot of clinical trials in rural healthcare, especially in the rural cancer world. And, it's always going to adapt as the world adapts to us. But the ultimate goal is I want to use my life experience from the very beginning of diagnosis through however long I'm here to help my friends' kids or my nephews or the next generation have it better than what I have. I know everybody wants to throw around the word cure, do this or that, and that's always an ultimate goal. But if their quality of life, whoever gets sick or whoever gets diagnosed, is better than what I had to go through, I think that is the best legacy I can have.
I mean, you're living proof that your voice matters. Like if you weren't using your voice, we wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't be here. Somebody needs to sponsor your Scullies, by the way, because like if you've seen JJ, you're watching this on YouTube. For those of you who maybe listen to the audio, you need to subscribe to the YouTube channel because it's video, by the way. But JJ is always in his signature Scullies, and your voice, man. You remind us that we've been placed here for a purpose that's much bigger than us. The one stigma that we want to break here at Genetics for Healthcare is that everyday people who have no reason to know about genetics and genomics, to let them know they can learn this. They can know these terms. They can learn the language. They can build the confidence to talk to their doctors and to talk to their family. And so when it comes to your health, we live with ourselves every day. And so, we've got to be the foremost expert in our own health to advocate for ourselves, to, again, urge those family members and people that we care about. Again, it is to break the stigma. Again, like I was raised in Denison, Texas, man, man up was
Yeah.
like the thing that we was told, man up,
That cowboy culture kind of is a lot of people I heard describe, cowboy culture of men. And yeah, it's good in some senses, but it could be a hard downfall too for us.
Absolutely. So on that note, I want you to give 3 practical tips for somebody who was watching this who may have just had a colorectal cancer diagnosis, or someone who is, facing the possibility or an option for a clinical trial, or even for someone who is gaining awareness around screening and wants to prevent a diagnosis. Like, what are 3 practical tips that you could share from your experience that can help empower someone to just be a better advocate for themselves?
I would say educate yourself. Don't be turned off by the first, few things that you see if you like put it into the computer, but find reputable sources. I always say go to the, organizations, the nonprofits because they vet all the information. Second would be don't be afraid to tell your doctor everything. Your medical professional, that's what they're there for. They're there to help you. Don't leave nothing out. Don't because you don't think it is important, but it could be very important to your health. See, then just find a place you're comfortable with. Don't isolate if you just got diagnosed or if you're worried. Isolation is one of the worst things that you could do. It is proven that if you isolate, you don't recover as quick. You might not do as good on treatment because the mental part of your body. And I think if you do that, never will say the outcome's going to be great, but it will put you in a lot better place.
JJ Singleton, a man with a powerful voice, a cancer patient advocate, and using his voice to help the world prevent and inspire those to fight and conquer colorectal cancer. All right, JJ, I got to ask you an important question before we go. Coach James Franklin, thumbs
love
up,
it.
love it.
Great, yes, great. I'm very excited about the future there.
Yeah, it's a raw deal. He got fired from Penn State. He's a really good coach.
He is, and I mean, it's weird that our head coach that got fired last year is now the defensive coordinator because he was James Franklin's defensive coordinator forever. So I think it's going to be a very big upgrade.
Well, we'll be watching them Hokies, man. I love the work you're doing. I love what you stand for, JJ, and man, just the courage that you have to use your voice in the way that you do, man, is really inspiring for people like myself. And I know it's going to help a lot of other people who are listening and watching this conversation as well. So, JJ, thanks for being a great guest on Genetics for Healthcare, a podcast for patients.
Thank you for having me. It was a true honor.